What is going on, Fightful Faithful, and welcome back here to Fightful Scraps for another interview on the UK scene. Today we are joined by the co-founders of Riot Cabaret, James Lawrence and Sean Thorne. How are you both doing today, lads?
Good, thanks, Corey. It's a lovely day here in London, and yeah, we're very happy to be on the show. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Very, very good. Thanks, man. It's my birthday today, so this is a birthday treat to be able to speak to you. So I'm having a lovely day.
Happy birthday to you then, Sean.
Thank you, man.
And guys, if you make sure to wish him a happy birthday in the comments as well, because he's more than deserving of it.
We might head to Weatherspoon later and put on the old table number on the Riot Cabaret X account. So if anyone wants some Jaeger bombs, then please feel free.
Absolutely. And so I want to start off at the very inception of Riot Cabaret, lads. You haven't been along too long now, a couple of years at this point, but have found some incredible success on the UK scene and European scene of wrestling in general. So I do want to ask the question of, with Riot Cabaret being such a unique kind of set-in presentation, so on, what went into that when you guys were forming the company, and what was the process like to start the promotion?
So bizarrely, I think simultaneously the largest roadblock that we had to overcome, but also the biggest blessing that we had was COVID. So originally we were due to run our first show on the 14th of April 2020. We were going to run in a venue in Mayfair. So I'm an actor by trade, and at the time I was doing a show there. It was an immersive show, and so it was this kind of beautiful old mansion, and it had like a chandelier in it and stuff like that. It was very cool. It was a really cool surrounding. In hindsight, knowing what we now know about the logistics of running wrestling shows, it would have been an absolute nightmare to run a show in. So I'm kind of glad that we ended up moving in the end. But that was very much the plan for the inception of the company. We wanted we knew we wanted it in a grand location, and we wanted to put a bit of kind of spectacle and grandeur onto the presentation of our wrestling product. At that time, I don't think we had sort of fully realized yet what the brand of Riot Cabaret would be and how we wanted to actually present that and tell that story to our audience. So, of course, when COVID then hit and lockdown came in earnest in March of 2020, we obviously had to cancel the April show, which was incredibly disappointing. And we built up to it for so long, for so many months, and putting everything in place, that it really did feel like a bit of a hammer blow. But actually, it turned out, I think, to probably be the best thing that could have happened to us, because during lockdown, we were able to make that connection with the Clapham Grand through a friend of mine. We were able to do a bit of a rethink of how we wanted our overall brand to be presented. And I think we came up with a package that was actually just much more appealing to an audience. So I think if we'd been running shows from April 2020, just the way that the brand was positioned and the way that we were telling the story of Riot Cabaret, I'm not convinced it would have taken flight in the way it has done now. I think lockdown and the time that afforded us to really think about how we wanted to position the company ended up being probably the best thing that could have happened to us overall.
Yeah, I think one of the things, like moving forward to like the present day of what we want Riot Cabaret to be, is like, we all know that wrestling is like the best thing ever. And we kind of want to be in a position where we can grow that audience. And I think the way to legitimately grow a wrestling audience is when wrestling fans can take their non-wrestling mates to shows, and the non-wrestling fans also have as good a time as your hardcore wrestling fans. And I think when we were positioning Riot Cabaret, it's like, while also giving people that top tier level of wrestling that they're used to on the British indies, what else can we give them to make this like a fun, good night out that they'd want to bring non-wrestling fan mates to? So then they come for the fun and the silliness and the spectacle, but then they'll see like a Michael Oku or a Connor Mills and be like, oh wait, actually like wrestling is really, really, really good. And then hopefully they then stick around and then maybe go and explore more of the scene.
And Sean, you mentioned it there, just like about Michael Oku, Connor Mills. There is a very broad amount of talent that have come through Riot Cabaret. Just some that have the big characters that lend themselves to kind of just a cabaret kind of presentation. But then on the flip side, you also have people like Oku, like Connor Mills, who are some of the best wrestlers I could argue in the world at the moment. So is there a particular, like, say, percentage of what way you want to present your product with the top wrestlers and the top characters, or is it kind of just a straight up 50-50?
I think it's a bit of both. I think when we think of who we're going to bring into Riot, I think one of the main things that we want is to come in and do something meaningful. We've got like such a long list of people who we want to work with, but we don't want to kind of just bring someone in and then they're gone. We kind of want to build something and do something interesting with them, and also potentially give them an opportunity to do something or a side of their character or a side of what they want to do that they don't normally get to do anywhere else. So again, I think one of the things with Riot is keeping that variety and keeping that balance of having great wrestlers come through and also great performers and great entertainers.
Absolutely. And I think as Sean's used the word variety there, which I think perfectly encapsulates certainly the way that we approach the wrestling at Riot Cabaret. Because I think if you in our experience of running shows, there have probably been times where we've given the audience a little bit too much of one thing. So whether that's a little bit too much of the cabaret silliness or a little bit too much of, the fast-paced wrestling action. And you can kind of see that it's kind of diminishing returns. It starts to lose its impact. Whereas if you've got a little bit of everything and all of those things are executed really, really well, it means people coming to a show and they're, everything on the card then is able to really stand out because it's not jostling for position in the same kind of part of people's attention, if that makes sense. So it's in the same way as, I'm sure that your kind of subscribers and the people who follow Fightful will have an idea of how a wrestling show is put together, in terms of people will be asked not to do a particular thing because it's being used elsewhere on the show. It's kind of that same idea, but, blown up to sort of 10 times magnification, because the more people are seeing different stuff all night long, the more you're going to be able to retain their attention. And then people come away from the shows being like, oh, that cabaret bit was really cool, wasn't it? And I like the kind of game show thing they would do. And then do you remember when those two lads just larruped the hell out of each other for 20 minutes? And then Nina Samuels did a musical. That was amazing. And so you've got all of these different elements that I think we do our best to execute as well as we possibly can. And people leave having had a kind of charcuterie board of really nice time.
And while we're on the subject of talent, I have to ask this because it's something that whenever it pops up on my feed, it gives me a good laugh. For people who aren't aware, people perhaps outside the UK, there's a certain character that routinely makes cameos in Riot Cabaret, Mr. Blobby. And I want to know the background of that, how that's came to be, how it's factored into plans, and you're both kind of grinning from ear to ear there when I brought it up. So I feel like is that kind of a testament to the silliness that you guys do like presented in Cabaret?
I think there's certain characters that would just be that are such a natural fit for Riot Cabaret, and that there's other ones besides Mr. Blobby that have very much been part of our conversation. But I think Blobby was the first one of those that really was truly realised, and Blobby has just been such a delightful part of the Riot Cabaret kind of story.
Roster? Can you say he's on the roster?
He's got a Legends deal at the very least. Because I think when we were setting that up, we've done a couple of themed rumbles up to that point, and I think there's a lovely moment at that show in January of 2023 when he comes out, where I think you can see the audience's reaction, and they're expecting it to be a wrestler coming out in a Mr. Blobby costume. It just so happened that in the news that week, one of the older versions of the Mr. Blobby costume had been on sale on eBay. So I think there was a moment where people had kind of gone like, oh, who's going to come out dressed as Mr. Blobby?
Yeah.
And then you can see everyone on the stage turn and look at the kind of curtain as people are coming out of Gorilla and go, it's proper Blobby. Oh my God. And then everyone just kind of, there's something about Blobby that just bypasses, in the most part anyway, bypasses the cynical, gnarled bit of everyone's brains and just kind of plugs directly into their overgrown child sort of input. And so everyone's just so happy to see him. And then obviously he did wonderful stuff for us last Christmas as well. In terms of how it came about, there's a pub in Holborn that shows lots and lots of sports, and certainly in the early days of Riot Cabaret, it's where some of our more outlandish booking ideas would come to us, with a bit of liquid inspiration. And Sean and I were watching the World Cup in there, and we were watching the England versus Iran game. And several goals had sort of gone in by this point, and Sean just went, do you know what would be brilliant? Right? Mr. Blobby in Riot Cabaret. So I've got to give him his due there. And I mentioned earlier on that an actor. So before too long, I was having a conversation with my lovely agent who used to work for the BBC. So she, of course, knows how to grease the wheels somewhat. She knows the people you need to get in touch with. And before you knew it, we were conversing with Blobby's people, I suppose we would say. And we had to explain to them what Riot Cabaret was and why it would be a really good idea. And we had to sort of convince them that we weren't going to ask him to sort of wrestle a 60-minute Iron Man match in the suit. And then they were all on board with the idea, and it was wonderful.
Really was a case of pub chat escaping the pub. In that, of all of the mad ideas that we've had in shout out to Philomena's in Holborn that have hosted many a Riot Cabaret booking meeting.
You want to go down there on any given night of the week, you will probably see Sean and I just hunched over a Google sheet, just scratching.
But yeah, nothing will ever prepare you for a day with Mr. Blobby. It's the moment you actually first see him in his full Blobby business, like coming out of his dressing room, when you just actually have a moment of realization, like, actually, what am I doing with my life? And he came out to kind of walk through what was going to be happening in the 90s Rumble. And then what proceeded was the most surreal 15 minutes. Is Wild Boar Mike Hitchman, one of the best wrestling trainers out there, renowned across Europe, is teaching Mr. Blobby how to do a Stone Cold Stunner. And all of this is happening, all the wrestlers around the ring, and absolutely everybody is just dying laughing. And the mad thing about all of this, and I swear this is completely true, during this rehearsal, and rehearsal in all caps here, Blobby is still in gimmick. He is still in character, blobbying around. And like Hitch is like, and then you do the kick, and then you do this, and he's like, Blobby, 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 Blobby. And it was like, this is just rehearsal. But when he's got the gear on, you know, he is full on Blobby. And yeah, it was a chaotic day. Well, both times we've had Mr. Blobby in our midst.
And moving on to a slightly more serious talent, that slightly is the key word I want to use there. But someone who's been a major part of Riot Cabaret, who's been one of your most booked talents, is Charles Crowley. You mentioned a bit earlier. Unfortunately, this year he's had a lot of issues, shall we say, and some of them have been in Riot Cabaret, some in other promotions. But for someone like Charles, to work with someone like Charles for so many times at this point, does he encapsulate kind of the most of what you guys want in Riot Cabaret?
I think so, yeah. And in terms of what Crowley brings to any wrestling show that he's on, not just Riot Cabaret, although I like to think we give him as much of a platform for that as we can, is the performance element of it. In terms of wrestling is ultimately about making people feel something, and the best wrestlers are amazing in ring and they're brilliant technically, but they're also great at that performance side and that eliciting of emotion from an audience. And when you watch back some of the clips from Crowley recently, so when they lost the tag team championships, him and Session Moth Martina, and she walked out on him effectively, when he came out for his entrance with the match with Spike at the last show, you can see the connection that he has between himself and the Riot Cabaret fans. And that doesn't happen by accident. You know, wrestling fans, if they're not moved to react to someone, they won't react to them. They might cheer you, they might boo you, or they might sit there in stony silence. And I don't think Charles Crowley has ever come out to anything other than a rapturous reception. When he was a heel, you know, he was one of the best at drawing heat from our crowd. And now that he's one of our kind of top faces, the people there love him. And I think that's for many reasons. He's just a terrific performer, but that connection, that emotional core and connection that he has with the audience is so brilliantly realized. And I think ultimately that's the role of great baby faces, is they are a surrogate for the audience. It's the audience wanting to be in their shoes and to overcome the odds with them. And I think Charles Crowley's just brilliant at bringing people along for that ride. And he thinks about wrestling in a very unique way, a very different way as well, which fits in with us brilliantly.
Yeah, I think what Crowley does really well is, again, what you said, is just elicit like actual human emotion. Like the last couple of outings that we've seen with Crowley is that, you don't always see like kind of classic wrestling Pavlov dog responses like booing and yaying. People are genuinely reacting to the stuff that he does. And I think what's been really great, especially with the Crowley and Session Moth story, I think it's something that WWE are doing really well at the moment, is that the majority of their stories aren't really wrestling stories. They're kind of people stories. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, love triangles or best friends or family dynamics or jostling for power. And I think what Crowley's really good at, and what particularly worked well with the Crowley and Session Moth story, which I think has probably been the story people strongly associate with Riot, is that it wasn't never really a wrestling story. It was just a story about like the relationship between these two characters and how it was kind of going up and down. Will they be friends? Won't they be friends? What's going on? Will she turn on him? Will he be there for her? And it's just very much a human story. And I think that's one of the great strengths of Crowley, is being able to deliver those stories, which work so well with our audience.
And just one more question about talent specifically before we move on to other topics. I mentioned this before we started recording to you, James, about Sunshine Machine. When I spoke to TK and Chuck a couple of days ago, they, as you both obviously are aware, they had a crazy weekend. It's just an absolutely insane weekend where they were just working every show, it felt like. But when I was speaking to them, they said that what you just said about Charles, about how they felt there is a very strong connection with the Riot Cabaret crowd. They understand their bits, so to speak, of their entrance, their taunts, the he's Samoan, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, you've had faith in Chuck's for a long time, because as you also mentioned to me beforehand, Chuck was the first world champion you guys did have in the promotion. So what's been like watching Sunshine Machine kind of like just in that similar role to Charles? And I know it's kind of the same question with different people, but hoping for a different answer.
No, 100%. I mean, the Sunshine Machine, I could wax lyrical about them all evening. They're such an integral part of what we do, and you're absolutely right. The connection with the audience that they have is so special. And I think that's something that's quite kind of typical of the Riot Cabaret audience, because we don't attract a particularly, like the real hardcore of the wrestling crowd from the country. It's a bit more casual. It's a little bit more people looking for a kind of a fun experiential night out. I'd put the caliber of our wrestling up there with any company in the country. And I think we do have an awful lot of real dyed-in-the-wool wrestling fans who come to every single one of our shows and love it. But the demographic of the audience, I think, is probably slightly unique to us in terms of who comes to our shows. And a lot of the time it's people who they are maybe used to kind of experiential nights out or doing something a little bit different. So they're aching to join in a lot of the time. And so anything like, with beach balls pinging around, or he's Samoan, for example, all of those things are really great moments where people can just feel that connection with an audience or feel like they're joining in. It's kind of like the same reason people like going to the Rocky Horror Show. Like they know the bits where you're supposed to shout out, and here it comes, and I like this bit, and yeah, off we go. And so when you've got that kind of thing that you can establish that kind of rapport with an audience, it's brilliant. Not to mention they're two great guys and are just a pleasure to have around the place, full stop, which really does go a long way. You can be the best wrestler on the card, but if you're kind of a pain to deal with, then, or people don't kind of take to you or whatever, then it's not quite as straightforward to keep you around. But like with Sunshine Machine, they really are as sunny, for want of a better word, behind the curtain and in front of it. Like they really are those two guys. And I think that overall, that backstage atmosphere is something that we've really tried to work hard to cultivate at Riot. We want people, both audience and performers and everyone working on crew and so forth, we want everyone to have as positive an experience with us as possible. And Sunshine Machine just bring that. They bring that whole vibe. And not to mention their in-ring work is amazing as well. Like, I mean, you saw you mentioned the weekend they've just had last year, All In Weekend in 2023. They had a tag match against Jay Joshua and Nico Angelo that a lot of people were saying was their match of All In Weekend. And I think for both those guys as well, for JJ and Nico, that was really a moment where I think to a London-based wrestling audience who hadn't seen a huge amount of them there, that was a real watershed moment for both of those guys as well, where I think Nico had done a little bit of stuff at Progress maybe. We'd had both of those guys on our Attack sort of joint show that we'd done at Money in the Bank weekend at the previous show. But I think that was the real announcement of Nico Angelo and Jay Joshua as two incredible talents to a London-based wrestling audience. And, you know, you've seen Nico's been doing brilliant work with Riot recently, as has JJ. And JJ and Connor had what is, again, this year being talked about as one of the matches of the weekend at the Attack show the following day after us. So Sunshine Machine is so great at not just their kind of roles and just making sure that the whole audience has a nice time as well, but also the talent that they work with. They always elevate whoever they're in the ring with. I can't think of a match that has involved Sunshine Machine in the history of Riot Cabaret that has under-delivered. They're just the best.
Yeah, I mean, you've covered pretty much all of my shared enthusiasm for Sunshine Machine related business. Yeah, we say on comms like they are the life and soul of Riot Cabaret, and that's not like just us like throwing lines out there. It's genuinely true. They are really integral for what we do. It's going to be such a cool moment when they get snapped up. When I can't wait to see when they have that next big step. That is going to be, I think, such a great moment for everyone, and I think everyone's going to delight in that. So yeah, love the Sunshine Machine, lads.
And James, you mentioned there back in June of last year, you guys did have that co-promote show with Attack Pro Wrestling. And I'm just wondering, is there plans for any more co-promote shows in the future? Or are you guys happy just running your own shows at the moment?
Yeah, there's not currently any plans for anything like that. I think it would depend on who the company was and what the pitch was. And I think if we thought that there was the right kind of people to work with at the right time to give our audience, you know, the best experience possible, then we'd always be open to those discussions. It does definitely make things, I think, a little bit more simpler and a bit more streamlined when sort of the chain of command is just sort of Sean and myself, in terms of us trying to get our vision across there as clearly as possible. That's always quite helpful. And when you get to collaborate with other people, it's fantastic and it's really enjoyable. And I think fans really love it as well. It's just a different way of working, really, and how you adapt to that is always an interesting challenge. So yeah, no plans currently. But look, hey, it's Forbidden Door next year. There are Forbidden Doors all over the world, not just between All Elite Wrestling and New Japan. So who's to say that, you know, a door may or may not creak open that one?
Someone might be knocking at the door. Someone might be knocking at the door at some place. But yeah, we love Attacker Ace. I think the only other stumbling block when doing collab shows is that because we're currently only running every 2 months, and we can barely fit in all the bits that we want to do in the 2.5 hours on a Tuesday night we do. I think when you lose half of the card as well, it then makes it even harder to kind of, again, get all of the stuff across and include all the talent and the things that you want to work with. I think that's the only thing that I think becomes tricky with collab shows. But again, like as James said, if there's like a pitch that comes in which maybe offers a different kind of wrestling experience, maybe levels up that experience a little bit for the audience, so it's not just kind of like your standard wrestling show, there's something cool and a little bit of a twist that's interesting, then then open for the conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I think just to really quickly add one thing to that as well, I think the All Caps All Day show that ran this year, All In Weekend, is a really interesting format. I think having, you know, multiple companies running their shows just in the same venue over an extended period of time is really interesting. And you have to worry, I think, then a little bit less about the cross-pollination of storylines or getting booking approvals and things like that. You can kind of keep it a little bit more siloed, but still collaborate on an overall product that is really cool and exciting, that the fans can then connect with. And then, of course, you then get the chance to showcase, you know, the brilliant breadth of wrestling that there is in this country. It was so fantastic. Like Sean and I go to Hustle all the time. We love it there. Sean works with Attack in Cardiff an awful lot. And North also put out an amazing product as well. So it's so great for fans who might not be particularly familiar with the work of 1, 2, or all 3 of those companies to be able to experience them in the same place on the same day and maybe come away as a new fan of all 3 new promotions.
And before I have a couple of specific questions about All In Weekend for you guys, but first I want to kind of just ask a broad question. Obviously, you guys did it last year as well, but was there much pressure? Obviously, you had the Pro Wrestling Ceasefire event the day before this year, but just in terms of being, I don't want to say the first real wrestling event because that kind of just like minimizes what Pro Wrestling Ceasefire did, and that's the last thing I want to do. But kind of just not just kicking off the weekend, but continuing on that momentum for Pro Wrestling Ceasefire. Was there much pressure, or was it kind of just a case of let's get this done?
I think we loved it.
Yeah, it was so exciting and such a privilege because for so many reasons. It's a privilege to be kicking off that weekend. It's such a great, huge weekend in the British wrestling calendar, and if you're part of it, regardless of where you kind of happen in the sequence of things, that just feels amazing. And we run shows on a Tuesday night. You know, we're normally a midweek company. It is a different kettle of fish in terms of audience size and energy when you're running on a Friday night. And it's when you go out there and you're used to seeing Tuesday night crowds, which are cool. You know, we fill the Clapham Grand on our Tuesday shows, but then we sold that thing out with 3 weeks to go. And you step through that curtain and you see what a Friday night All In crowd looks and sounds like. I'm getting like goosebumps on the arm already. It's so
do the rock slap, mate. Do the rock slap.
So that's really awesome. And yeah, no kind of pressure in that sense. Obviously, you always feel the pressure to put on the best show you possibly can. But when you go out there and the audience are giving you that much love and they're that excited, and also as well their energy levels are right up there because we've not all been absolutely pulverized by 4 days of kind of non-stop wrestling by that point. So people are like absolutely champing at the bit for a really nice evening, and they're giving you so much energy. And look, it's a Friday night, so they probably had a few beers and they're ready to go. There's no feeling like it. So yeah, we couldn't be happier to be running Friday night again next year.
And I think Riot is kind of, in just the sense of the show that it is, I think it's very well placed where it is, kind of what James touched upon then, in that it's not going to be 2.5 hours of 25-minute matches. This is going to be, it is to start the party, it's to get people ready for a whole weekend of wrestling. So I think that's definitely what we think about as well when putting that show together, in that we wanted to have 8 very different helpings to get everybody ready for the weekend. So I think we love that little spot there. I'm hoping Tony Khan keeps bringing AEW to London every single August bank holiday, because we very much have a nice time.
And I was gonna lead with the men's world title, but now that you mentioned that, I do have to ask about the women's world title. First, Nina Samuels, she's held that title for nearly 750 days at this point, I think, at the latest count. Could be a little less, but she did defend her title. She defeated Session Martina and Millie McKenzie. But the big news coming out of that was Thunder Rosa showing up, calling her shot. She's going to have her shot at the title at Thunder Road later this year. I just want to ask the process of Thunder Rosa appearing, working with AEW to make it. Did you work with AEW to make it happen? Was it the case she was in town, she wanted to be, or was it a long-term plan? Just background on that would be nice to hear.
Yeah, so Thunder was actually there in the crowd at our show, All Singing, All Dancing in 2023. So she came, and it was quite odd because she didn't have her paint on. I don't think most people recognized her. So she was kind of moving through the crowd incognito, and no one.
Well, no, they did. That was the thing. We had to move her up by comms because she was getting swamped, I think.
Yeah. She was quite unbothered when I said hello to her, but yeah, clearly then later on that happened. So we made that connection there because she really was very complimentary about the show and was very cool. And when we were looking at what we wanted to do for this show this year, we had that relationship with Thunder and her team, so we were able to just kind of open up those lines of communication and say, because I think once people see what we're about and the kind of shows that we produce, at the very least they're open to the conversation. So we were thrilled that they were happy to sit down with us and kind of talk, potential directions that we might want to go in. And we didn't work, directly ourselves with AEW per se, but obviously they have a big say so in what their talents do and where they go. So we couldn't be more thankful to them as well for letting us work with Thunder, because she just gave everyone, and they gave everyone, such an electrifying moment that weekend. It was so cool to, you know, to kick off the weekend, as you say, with a moment like that. That's what I love about pro wrestling as an art form. It doesn't exist in any other medium, those surprises, and you never know who's going to show up, and you don't know what's going to happen. It's one of my favorite sights in wrestling, is just watch a building realize, like the Mr. Blobby effect, let's call it that. You know, watching an audience realize who's coming down that ramp and just responding with no filter, no cynicism, just pure glee is so cool. And I was ringside for it. I'm normally backstage in Gorilla watching the shows with our amazing producer Shah Samuels. But there are some times where, if I know I'm not going to be needed for a little while, I will just sneak up to ringside and watch them. And I just had to sit ringside for the Thunder Rosa entrance, and I forgot I was running the company. I was just so, yeah, it was awesome. And Thunder and her team and AEW have been absolute saints the whole way. So we're very excited for October.
Yeah, I very much forgot I was supposed to be commentating. I'd realised that I'd just been there, like, mouth agape for, again, amazing commentator Dave Bradshaw once again carried my ass through an important Riot Cabaret moment. But it was kind of something which I touched upon earlier, which has been really great with working with Thunder and her team, is that, again, with Riot Cabaret, there's an opportunity to do something more, or to do something that maybe you're not actually doing elsewhere. And I think one of the things that was quite exciting was for Thunder to be able to do something more musical based. It's something that she does, something she's very talented at, and being able to do that at a wrestling space was something which was very interesting. And I think it's only kind of like at Riot Cabaret where things like that where we hear something like, oh, you've got a musical number in you. Well, let's see what we can do to make that happen. And I think like that's one of the only companies who really do that. And it was, as James said, it was really, I think there was a lot of that all singing, all dancing show, which I think meant quite a lot to both of us in just how far the company's kind of gone in the 2.5 years or so that it's been running. And I think having a former AEW Women's World Champion performing for us in front of a building that's been sold out for 3 weeks was kind of like a nice moment of, okay, right, we're by no means finished yet, but we're heading in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I do want to, before we get to the men's world title, I'll swap the women's world title and the men's world title questions around, but we'll stick with what I was going to talk about in a minute. Now, at All Singing, All Dancing 2024, there was a very unique match on the card, one that broke records, in fact, something that Amira has been very, very vocal about. She's been very happy about this fact on social media. But obviously, Amira versus Cassius, and then Simon Miller was guest referee. The match went 2 hours, and sorry, let me check Cage Match really quickly here. 2 hours, 45 minutes, and 46 seconds. An absolutely ridiculously length match. It's not the longest match ever in wrestling. That goes to a match in Japan, I believe. But what was the idea of this match like? Because at the end of the day, it is breaking records. It is something that grabs a headline straight away. And obviously with Amira and Cassius and Simon, it was going to be a lot of fun, and it was.
Workhorses. What workhorses?
Absolutely. And it's as well, just to pay tribute to the cardio of Amira and Cassius as well, because when they battled back into the venue and we had the ending of the match there, there was barely a bead of sweat on them, which is really testament to the work they were doing. It was something that, in terms of that rivalry, I think it typifies of, something that's Riot Cabaret all over again. Is what's something that's a little bit different, what's something that's a little bit fun, how can we present this in an interesting way? And as much as anything, just from a purely logistical standpoint, we've got so many people kind of up on the balcony, and if you have people kind of, I don't know, brawling around the ground floor, I think very quickly it becomes quite hard to see what's going on, which is really fun if it's happening right next to you. But if it's happening on the other side of the building, it's not particularly entertaining. So what can we do if we want to do a Falls Count Anywhere match? What can we do to present that in a way that
let's put them in a speedboat?
What's the way that everyone can really enjoy themselves and have a nice time, and hopefully give it something that's a little bit different. So we had this idea. I can't remember if this was a Philomena's in Holborn idea. It's got Phil's fingerprints all over it, to be honest. And we basically had this idea of okay, yeah, in all seriousness, what if we begin the match in the arena, they brawl to the outside, and then it's just a series of vignettes that you drip in through the evening. There was even one that was cut for time that we had. So maybe I've heard a few people kind of clamoring for the Snyder cut of the Falls Count Anywhere match that might get released at some point. But yeah, I think people have compared it quite favorably to some of the the special matches that DDT have produced over the years, for example, which is that's great, because that's kind of exactly what we were going for. So if people have drawn that comparison themselves, then that's enormously flattering, because yeah, we love those kind of things. And it was a very interesting day shooting, let me tell you, sort of guerrilla style, just running between various London locations with Amira and Cassius in full gear, Simon Miller filling out a referee shirt beautifully and in the tiniest shorts I've ever seen, and just lots and lots of confused Londoners just watching us do this absurd little thing.
Yeah, there was a moment during the speedboat shoot where I was just like, again, I had a Mr. Blobby moment of what's going on here, like really, really, really surreal stuff. And there was also a moment during the skate park scene. Again, just for context, just in case people listening haven't actually seen the match. So Cassius and Amira, they fought in a skate park on a train, and then Cassius tried to escape Amira by hijacking a speedboat, or jumping on a speedboat, let's say. And then Amira managed to sneak on board the speedboat, and then they brawled on the speedboat, ending in Cassius taking a savage DDT, face first, right on the deck, nose first, big massive noise. And yeah, so it was complete and utter chaos. But yeah, I think nothing will compare to that speedboat brawl. But also what I was about to say was, I think the scariest moment of all of that was teaching Simon Miller how to skateboard in the skate park, because he was going to skate off screen to make the count. They'd never been on a skateboard before. And I'm like, are we going to break Simon Miller here? Doing
injure him again.
Exactly, for one gag spot in a Falls Count Anywhere pre-tape. Is Simon Miller actually going to break himself here? But yeah, that was a scary moment. But other than that, the whole thing was just complete and utter joyous insanity.
And now we will get to the world title. Last question about All Singing, All Dancing. Michael Oku has been an incredible champion for you guys over 300 days, surpassed Chuck Mambo's previous reign as world champion for the longest reign. Mark Andrews is the new champion coming off this. Mark Andrews feels like everywhere in recent months, and he came up short back in April. But I just kind of want to ask from a booking perspective, if that's possible, what changed between April and August for Mark to come out with the title this time?
I think the presence of subculture. If you saw that match, Flash Morgan Webster and Danny Luna really were the difference makers, and it was a triple threat as well. So obviously there's an added element of kind of chaos in there in the form of Nico Angelo, who him and Michael Oku have had a really good relationship, but when it comes to the championship, there's no friends. So it really was anyone's game at that point. But I think the numbers game in the end was the real difference maker for Mark there. And there was perhaps at the Arm Drags and Glad Rags show where Mark initially challenged Michael Oku, there was maybe an element of Mark trying to comport himself in a way that was quite gentlemanly. I think he wanted to prove that he could beat Oku one-on-one on the level. And then when Oku managed to get the win in a very interestingly, actually, Michael Oku, the ending of that match, it was the only match where Michael Oku hadn't submitted his opponent to the half crab. It was, I forget the pinning combination exactly, but it was a quick pin. I think it was a rolling crucifix or something like that. So it was fast. And I think that changed something in Mark Andrews, as well as everything that Michael Oku and he had been exchanging in the build up to that match in terms of the war of words, and Michael Oku questioning whether Mark, had been coasting for the last couple of years. In Mark's mind, I think there's an element there of, it was a sneaky win. It was a quick pin. This isn't over. And so if you want to talk about the booking of that, I think there's a logical journey there for Mark Andrews in terms of coming back and allowing that to really stew for him and coming back with a renewed strategy.
I think, yeah, and also, I mean, it's the Fightful podcast. We can peel the curtain back a little bit. It's what the people want. I think.
Answer whatever way you want. If you want to go full kayfabe and say how Mark really hates Michael, you can do that as well.
I'm trying to just, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, after you've just delicately just pirouetted through the waters, I'm just going to be here like, bang. Come on, let's give the people what they want.
Go on then.
No, it's not going to be anything too spicy. It was, I think, again, just a reality of booking stories and running wrestling shows is that for every perfect story that you want to tell, you will get obstacle after obstacle and everything thrown in your face almost at any opportunity. I think like the phrase we use is like wrestling promoters make plans and God laughs, or something to that effect. And I think the journey between all arms drags and glad rags to all singing, all dancing, we were dealt a lot of obstacles in terms of injuries, inavailability. And it's a very real thing that you kind of have to deal with in you know, when like Harry Potter's getting written, if Hagrid gets to chapter 3 and does his ankle and then he's out for the whole rest of the book, you don't get that when you're writing stories. But in wrestling like that can happen. You know, you can be building up Harry Potter for 5 books and then he does his cruciates and then that's it. Then Ron Weasley's got to take the strap. Like that's kind of the challenge you have, is when you're putting together wrestling stories. And I think sometimes when you're kind of like, oh, why was that booked like that, or like, oh, I'm not sure why they did that. Oftentimes the idea which you think makes the most sense in your head was what they wanted to do, but there would be things happening, turmoil behind the scenes, especially at kind of like an indie wrestling level, that means you have to kind of tap dance through a hurricane a little bit. But that being said, I still think like I loved the Mark and Mike story, and again the very sort of, we like to like touch on like kind of like real things every now and again, and I liked the real sort of genuine rivalry that was between those two. And
just to quickly add something onto that as well. Number one, for the record, not comparing Mark Andrews to Ron Weasley, and number two, great characters though.
No, he's more Draco Malfoy. He's more.
I just have the mental image of Hagrid kicking in the door of the house that they're on the island and going, "Hammy, uncle."
Yeah. Hammy's gone. Oh God, we've got to get a new giant in.
Hagrid injures himself smashing through the forbidden door. It was, I think, one of the things that we've always wanted to kind of do with Riot, and I think Mark Andrews, the way that he's currently being presented, is kind of typifies that, is we're always very interested in what's different and what aren't people seeing elsewhere. And Mark has done so brilliantly the kind of prototypical babyface role for the vast majority of his career. I think that he's had a very brief heel run a few years back, but on the whole, he's a man with all of these years of experience, and for approximately 90% of that, he has been an absolute 100% high honor babyface. And if you can just suddenly go to your audience, that expectation's been set for so long, the moment you then subvert that and show them another facet of that character, and also as well what that performer can do in a different lens, in a different mode, suddenly very interesting. People like to kind of have a little look at it and go, oh, okay, I'm interested to see where they go with this. And James Musselwhite, our brilliant photographer, we were talking to him about the plans for, because we tell James, you know, what we're going to do on that show, so he knows where to be and what to capture and all this kind of thing. And at the Arm Drags and Glad Rags show, which is where we got the full turn from Mark, he kind of turned to me and was like, "You're turning Mark Andrews heel." I was like, and just you watch.
Yeah.
And he got a "fuck you, Mandrews" chant at the end of the last show, so I would say green stamp, job done.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do let you go, lads, I do have one final question. Just with Riot being, as we said, still a relatively young promotion in the UK, especially with several promotions running for much longer, what are the immediate goals for Riot Cabaret towards the end of 2024 and into 2025? What are you guys looking to kind of improve on, or what are the general goals?
I think in terms of purely, if we were to think back to, let's take Progress as an example, when not just Progress, but British wrestling as a whole was really kind of at its zenith and it was properly booming. Progress would announce a show and you'd go onto their website and it would sell out within the space of, 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
At the moment, in terms of our audience numbers, they're going up and up and up show on show, which is obviously, that's a great trend. It's exactly what we would like. When you have the kind of security and the knowledge that your show has sold out quite far in advance, like we did on this last show on All Singing, All Dancing, the freedom that then kind of gives you as a promoter to kind of go, okay, we know we are financially secure in terms of the gate on this show. What can we add? What can we throw extra into the mix to make sure that people have the best time possible? And that's when we're able to do things like a Thunder Rosa surprise. That's when we're able to do things like a completely unannounced match between Zazaya and Leon Slater. So the more people kind of lock the tickets in nice and early, the more you can then start to really kind of cook as a promoter, because for a simple logistical reason, your bandwidth is not occupied with sales and tickets and marketing. It's occupied with, or you can occupy it more with, what are all the ingredients we can put into making this the best show. So if I was to kind of verbalize one wish for Riot Cabaret in the next year, it would be to get to that point where the shows are consistently selling out in good time, because then that's when the actual quality of the shows becomes kind of stratospheric, just because we can give it that much more attention. As much as anything else as well, I think we've had a few people kind of speak to us. So there was a couple of our fans who were down. They'd been to some of our earlier shows and then they moved to Manchester, but they came down for All In weekend. So they were of course back, and saw them in Spoons afterwards, and I was like, oh my God, hey, it's been ages. Yeah. Where have you been? And they were like, we moved to Manchester and we're really fuming about it because it means we can't come to Riot anymore. Yeah. They were like, please come to Manchester. I've been telling all my wrestling friends in that area
how good you are.
Yeah, and kind of thing. And I think stuff like that, if we know that there is the demand and the interest in an area outside of London, and B, there's the right venue, because I think the ground is such a huge part of what we do. There's a venue there that's exciting and it's interesting to us and that fits the aesthetic and the kind of the values of what we want to do. That would be really interesting as well. Not to kind of overstretch ourselves, but if we could maybe kind of share the love a little bit, share the Riot love outside of the M25, then that would be really cool as well.
I think for me, again, echoing a lot of what James has been saying, I think one of the things, even when we first started Riot, I'd like to see come in, maybe 2025, maybe earlier, is what are things that you can do to just elevate the standard wrestling experience? What can you do to kind of make what you're seeing feel a little bit more immersive and make this show feel a little bit more live? Wrestling's meant to seem like a live sporting thing that's unfolding in front of you. What are the things that you could do to make either a section of the audience or all of the audience feel more part of the show with other little immersive elements? Do you go off and see an angle live, and then maybe a decision an audience member makes influences something that happens in the show? Just kind of little things like that I think we'd like to explore for 2025. And also, again, making sure that we're just staying creative and coming up with new exciting concepts that, again, it's a chicken and the egg situation. We need to be putting on amazing shows in order to be selling out nice and early. What are the things that we can come up with that can connect to an audience, inspire them to be right, I'm going to bring my mates to a Riot show because I know we're definitely going to have a nice time. That's the sort of thing that we want to be building on for 2024. But as I said, like I said, at that moment, it All Singing, All Dancing with Thunder Rosa singing in front of a sold out crowd, that's kind of right, we're going in the right direction. Let's just make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and try and all this other stuff and just keep going and keep growing. But yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal was always, I'm sure every wrestling promoter is the same. It's just more asses in seats. Yeah. It's always the dream.
And lads, thank you so much for sitting down with me for this interview. You've both been an absolute pleasure to chat to. Do you want to plug your social medias, Riot social medias, and do you have anything else that you want to kind of promote while you're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on all of the usual places across socials, at Riot Cabaret on absolutely everything. Type in Riot Cabaret on YouTube. That'll take you straight to our YouTube channel, which has been beautifully curated by the lovely Sean Thorne. And as well as that, I think you said by the time this interview goes out, we should be live with it as well. You can now head to riotcabaret.com and you can sign up to Riot Cabaret Gold, which is our VOD platform. You can see every single Riot Cabaret show. You can relive all of your favorite moments or catch up on shows you've missed wherever you are. You can catch it. It works on phones, tablets, laptops. You can cast to your TV, the whole kit and caboodle. So it's $5.99 a month or $59.99 for the full year. And as well as access to the full video library, you also get some other exclusive merch, early access to future show ticket pre-sales, and lots of other good stuff as well. Q&As with Sean and myself and talent. So there's a lot of good stuff on there, and we're going to keep adding features to it the longer it's online. So riotcabaret.com and become a gold member.
And if we haven't sorted it out, then you've got your Fightful exclusive. It's happening. Like, there it is. This is the first place you've heard it.
Absolutely, lads. And again, thank you so much for sitting down for this. Guys, if you are new to this channel, to Fight for Scraps, subscribe. If you haven't heard of Riot Cabaret before, I would absolutely 100% recommend checking them out. Check out Riot Cabaret Gold. They're the perfect blend of incredible pro wrestling and incredible characters. Make sure to check them out, because their next event in October will feature Thunder Rosa challenging Nina Samuels for the Riot Cabaret Women's Championship. She has held for nearly 750 days, and it will be over 750 days by then. And yeah, guys, like, comment, subscribe, and let us know who you guys want me to interview on the UK scene next. And deuces.